What are you doing out here all alone? It's far too cold to be outside at this hour.
Maya hesitated, her voice barely a whisper.
I don't have anywhere to go.
The woman's eyes softened, and she extended her hand.
Come with me. You shouldn't be out here like this.
Maya looked at the outstretched hand, her heart pounding. She didn't know this woman, but something in her voice, something in the gentle way she spoke, made Maya feel a flicker of hope.
I can't keep pretending. It's better for everyone if she's not here.
Mark's eyes narrowed, disbelief mingled with disgust.
You're talking about her like she's some inconvenience. She's a child, Lydia, our daughter.
But Lydia's heart had already closed off. In her mind, a wall had gone up, barrier between her and the child she'd once taken in, out of love and desperation. She couldn't break through it now, even if she wanted to. Mark stormed out of the room without another word, his heart heavy with anger and disbelief. He searched the house for Maya, but she was gone. Her bedroom was empty, her bed untouched. Panic surged through him as he rushed outside, calling her name into the night. His shouts echoed in the stillness, but there was no response. The darkness seemed to swallow his voice, leaving him standing alone in the cool night air, gripped by a gnawing fear. Maya ran down the quiet street, her vision blurred by tears. The cool wind whipped through her hair, stinging her face as she sprinted aimlessly, her tiny body moving on instinct alone. All she knew was that she had to get away, away from the house, away from the words that had pierced her heart, away from the unbearable pain of being unwanted. Her chest heaved as she slowed to a walk, her feet dragging along the cracked sidewalk. She had no idea where she was going. She just kept walking, hoping that the further she went, the less the ache inside her would hurt. Eventually, the exhaustion took over. She found a bench near a park and curled up on it, hugging her knees tightly to her chest. The night air was cold, and she shivered beneath her thin sweater, her tears mingling with the dirt on her face. She had no idea how long she'd been sitting there, but it felt like an eternity. For the first time in her young life, Maya truly understood what it meant to be alone. Hours passed, and the night grew darker. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the park. Maya's eyes fluttered closed, her body worn out from crying and running. But just as she began to drift off into an uneasy sleep, a soft voice broke through the haze.
Are you all right, little one?
Maya's eyes snapped open. She looked up, startled, to see a woman standing beside her, her face illuminated by the faint glow of the streetlight. The woman was older, her hair streaked with grey, and her eyes warm and kind. She wore a long coat and clutched a briefcase in one hand. Maya blinked, unsure whether she was dreaming. She didn't answer. The woman knelt down beside her, her brow furrowing in concern.
What are you doing out here all alone? It's far too cold to be outside at this hour.
Maya hesitated, her voice barely a whisper.
I don't have anywhere to go.
The woman's eyes softened, and she extended her hand.
Come with me. You shouldn't be out here like this.
Maya looked at the outstretched hand, her heart pounding. She didn't know this woman, but something in her voice, something in the gentle way she spoke, made Maya feel a flicker of hope. She hesitated for only a moment before reaching out and placing her small hand in the woman's. The woman smiled, helping her to her feet.
My name is Judge Eleanor Bennett.
She said softly, leading Maya toward her car parked nearby.
What's your name, dear?
Maya.
She whispered, her voice barely audible. Eleanor glanced down at her, her heart aching at the sight of the lost little girl.
Well, Maya, you're safe now. I promise.
Over the next few weeks, Maya's life changed in ways she could never have imagined. Judge Eleanor Bennett took her in, opening the doors of her warm, welcoming home. The house was filled with soft, cozy furniture, colourful rugs, and the smell of freshly baked bread that wafted from the kitchen. It was a far cry from the cold bench in the park where Maya had spent that fateful night. Eleanor was kind and patient, and though she asked Maya about her family, she never pressed when the girl grew too quiet or looked away. It was clear that Maya wasn't ready to talk about what had happened. Instead, Eleanor focused on making her feel safe, loved, and cared for. The judge had never had children of her own, though she'd always longed for them. At 50, she'd resigned herself to a life without motherhood, pouring all her energy into her career. But when she had seen Maya sitting alone on that bench, something had shifted in her heart. She knew that Maya needed her, and perhaps, in some way, she needed Maya too. Maya, meanwhile, struggled to adjust to her new reality. She was grateful for Eleanor's kindness, but the wounds left by Lydia's rejection were still fresh. She spent many nights crying herself to sleep, wondering what she had done to deserve being cast out by the only mother she'd ever known. But as the weeks turned into months, she slowly began to heal. Eleanor enrolled her in a new school, and though Maya was shy at first, she eventually made friends. The warmth and stability that Eleanor provided gave Maya a sense of security that she hadn't known in years. For the first time in a long time, she started to believe that she might be worthy of love. Eleanor formally adopted Maya a year after they met, and from that day forward, they were inseparable. Eleanor became the mother Maya had always longed for, and Maya became the daughter Eleanor had always dreamed of. Together, they built a life filled with love, laughter, and the kind of bond that only comes from having been through the darkest of times and finding light on the other side. But even as Maya's new life blossomed, the memory of Lydia still lingered in the shadows of her heart. She tried to forget, tried to push it all away, but the hurt remained, buried deep within her. Little did she know, the time would come when the past would collide with the present in ways she could never have anticipated. 30 years passed, and with them, life's complexities deepened. Maya, now a woman of 40, had grown into a confident, intelligent, and respected judge. Much like her adoptive mother, Eleanor Bennett. Following in Eleanor's footsteps, Maya had found her passion in the pursuit of justice and fairness, inspired by the very person who had rescued her from a life of abandonment. Eleanor, now retired and entering her twilight years, remained a steady presence in Maya's life. Her wisdom and kindness, an unshakable foundation. Yet, despite the love and success she had found, Maya couldn't entirely escape the shadows of her past. The memories of her early childhood, of Lydia's sharp words and cold dismissal, lingered in the back of her mind. Though she tried to forget, the pain still haunted her in quiet moments, whispering of an unresolved wound. Maya had never sought out Lydia again. And though the years had softened the sting of her abandonment, it had not erased it. Now, Judge Maya Bennett was one of the most esteemed legal minds in New Jersey, presiding over cases that ranged from family law disputes to high-profile criminal trials. Her reputation for fairness, precision, and empathy earned her the respect of her peers and the trust of the community. She had become everything Lydia could never have imagined for her. But fate, it seemed, had not yet finished weaving its threads. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when Maya's life took an unexpected turn. She sat in her chambers, reviewing the case docket for the week, a cup of coffee steaming beside her. The cases lined up before her were varied, from business disputes to divorce proceedings, but one in particular caught her eye. The name, Lydia Warner. Maya's heart skipped a beat as her eyes scanned the familiar name, her breath catching in her throat. Could it be the same Lydia? The thought was almost too surreal. She hadn't thought of Lydia Warner in any meaningful way for years, but now her name leapt out from the case file as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. Curiosity and dread washed over her as she continued reading. The case was a civil lawsuit. Lydia Warner was being sued for fraud, accused of swindling investors in a failed business venture. The charges were serious, and if convicted, Lydia could face substantial penalties, including prison time. Maya stared at the file, her mind racing. Could this really be her, the woman who had cast her aside all those years ago? A knock on the door broke her reverie. Her clerk, Marissa, poked her head in, holding a stack of papers.
Judge Bennett, they're ready for you in the courtroom.
Marissa said, unaware of the storm brewing in Maya's mind. Maya nodded, closing the file and composing herself.
Thank you, Marissa. I'll be right there.
As she gathered her thoughts and prepared for the day's cases, Maya couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in her chest. If this Lydia Warner was, in fact, the same woman who had abandoned her, what would she do? Could she handle facing her again after all these years? The day Lydia Warner's case came before her, Maya sat on the bench with her usual air of authority and grace, her judicial robes flowing around her as she settled into her chair. The courtroom was filled with lawyers, reporters, and the quiet murmurs of anticipation that always accompanied high-stakes cases. But today, Maya's calm exterior masked the storm of emotions roiling inside her. The bailiff called the case, and the door to the defendant's side of the courtroom opened. In walked Lydia Warner, escorted by her attorney. Maya's breath caught in her throat, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of the woman she hadn't seen in 3 decades. It was her. Lydia Warner, now in her 60s, looked much older than Maya had imagined. The years had not been kind to her. Her once bright eyes were dulled by fatigue, her skin drawn tight over her bone, and her hair had thinned, now a dull shade of grey. The confident, poised woman Maya remembered from her childhood had been replaced by someone who looked worn down, beaten by life. Lydia didn't notice Maya at first. She seemed preoccupied with her lawyer, her face etched with worry as she fidgeted with her hands. But as Lydia sat down and looked up at the judge's bench, her eyes locked onto Maya's, and in that instant, recognition flashed across her face. Lydia gasped, her eyes widening with shock and disbelief. She blinked several times, as if trying to convince herself that the woman before her wasn't real.
Maya?
She whispered under her breath, though the word was barely audible in the courtroom. Maya's expression remained stoic, her hands folded neatly in front of her. But beneath her calm facade, her heart raced. She couldn't believe it. After all these years, here Lydia was, standing before her, needing her judgment. For a long moment, the two women simply stared at each other, both grappling with the enormity of what was happening. Then, Lydia's lawyer began his opening remarks, breaking the tension that hung heavy in the room. Maya forced herself to focus on the case. She had a job to do. She couldn't let her personal feelings interfere with the pursuit of justice. But as the proceedings unfolded, she couldn't help but notice the way Lydia kept glancing up at her, her face a mixture of shock, guilt, and something else. Something Maya couldn't quite place. The trial continued over the next few days, with witness testimonies, evidence presentations, and the usual back and forth between the attorneys. Maya remained professional, her demeanour measured and impartial, but each day she felt Lydia's eyes on her, watching, waiting, as if hoping for some acknowledgement. Finally, during a recess, Lydia requested to speak with Maya privately. It was an unusual request, but given their history, Maya decided to allow it. They met in her chambers, away from the prying eyes of the courtroom. Lydia stood nervously by the door as Maya sat behind her desk, her gaze steady, unflinching.
Maya,
Lydia began,
I can't believe it's you.
her voice trembling. Maya said nothing, her face an unreadable mask. Lydia fidgeted, her hands wringing together as she searched for the right words.
I know you probably hate me, and I don't blame you. What I did to you, throwing you out like that, it was unforgivable.
Maya remained silent, her heart pounding in her chest. She had waited years for this moment, but now that it was here, she didn't know what to say.
I thought about you every day.
Lydia continued, her voice breaking.
I've regretted what I did for so long, but I was too ashamed to try to find you to apologize. I didn't think you'd ever want to see me again.
Maya finally spoke, her voice cold, controlled.
You abandoned me. I was 7 years old and you left me to fend for myself on the streets. Do you have any idea what that did to me?
Tears welled up in Lydia's eyes, her lips trembling.
I know I hurt you. I was wrong. I don't have an excuse for what I did. I was selfish and scared, and I let my own insecurities destroy our family.
Maya felt a surge of emotion rise in her chest, but she pushed it down, refusing to let Lydia see her vulnerability.
You didn't just destroy our family, you destroyed me. If it weren't for Judge Bennett, I don't know where I'd be. She saved me when you wouldn't.
Lydia's tears fell freely now, her voice barely a whisper.
I'm so sorry, Maya. I wish I could take it all back.
For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of their shared pain hanging heavy in the air. Maya stood, her hands resting on the desk as she leaned forward slightly.
I don't need your apology, Lydia. I'm not that little girl anymore. I've built a life without you, and I'm stronger for it. But that doesn't mean I've forgotten what you did.
Lydia nodded, her face pale, defeated. With that, the meeting ended. Lydia left the chambers, her shoulders hunched, the door closing softly behind her. Maya stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where Lydia had been. The wounds of the past had been reopened, but this time, Maya was the one in control. The trial came to its conclusion, and the jury deliberated for hours before finally reaching a verdict. As they filed back into the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Lydia sat at the defense table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face pale and drawn. Maya presided over the final moments of the case, her voice steady as she read the jury's decision.
On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant, Lydia Warner, guilty.
The words echoed through the courtroom, sealing Lydia's fate. Lydia's shoulders slumped, her face a mask of sorrow. As the bailiff approached to escort Lydia out of the courtroom, Maya watched in silence. The woman who had once been her mother was now a convicted criminal, and it was Maya's duty to ensure that justice was served. The finality of the moment struck Maya with a sense of closure she hadn't anticipated. This was it. The reckoning Lydia had unknowingly run from for 30 years. Lydia hesitated before being led away, her eyes seeking Maya's one last time. There was no hatred or malice in Lydia's gaze now, only sorrow and regret. But Maya did not meet her eyes. Instead, she turned away, the weight of the gavel in her hand a reminder of the authority she now held, the power to determine Lydia's fate. Once the courtroom had emptied, Maya sat alone at her bench. Her mind raced with memories from her childhood, flashes of the home she had once known, of Lydia's smile before Jacob was born, of the loneliness and fear that had consumed her as a child. She had always wondered what it would be like to confront Lydia again, to see her face the consequences of her choices. Now that it had happened, Maya didn't feel the satisfaction she had expected. Instead, she felt empty. Judge Eleanor Bennett, who had raised her, had taught her that justice was about more than retribution. It was about fairness, about setting things right. But how could you ever set right something as broken as a childhood abandoned by a mother? Later that evening, Maya visited Eleanor. The old house still felt like home, the walls lined with photographs from Maya's youth, moments of joy and peace that had defined her second chance at a family. Eleanor sat in her favourite armchair by the fire, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea as Maya walked in, still wearing her court attire.
You look tired, darling.
Eleanor said softly,
The trial took a lot out of you, didn't it?
studying Maya's face. Maya sat on the couch across from her, sighing deeply.
It was Lydia, Eleanor. I sentenced Lydia Warner today.
Eleanor's eyes widened slightly, though she remained calm.
I thought as much when you mentioned her name the other day. It must have been difficult for you.
Maya nodded.
I thought I'd feel something else. Anger, satisfaction, maybe relief, but I just feel empty. It's like all these years I've been carrying this weight, and now that it's finally over, I don't know what to do with it.
Eleanor set her cup down and leaned forward, her expression gentle but firm.
Maya, forgiveness doesn't come from seeing someone punished. It comes from letting go of the hurt they caused you. You don't have to forgive Lydia if you're not ready, but you have to let go of the hold she has on your heart. Otherwise, she'll continue to shape your life in ways you may not realize.
Maya looked into the fire, flames dancing as Eleanor's words sunk in. She'd spent years burying the pain of Lydia's betrayal, thinking that success and love would erase the scars. But now, faced with the reality of seeing Lydia broken and defeated, she realized that the hurt had never truly left her. It had merely been waiting for this moment to resurface.
I don't know if I can forgive her.
Maya whispered.
That's okay.
Eleanor said softly.
Forgiveness is a process. Sometimes it takes years, but the first step is realizing that forgiveness isn't for Lydia. It's for you. It's about freeing yourself from the past.
Maya blinked back tears, her throat tight.
I spent so long wanting to confront her, to show her that I made something of my life without her. But now that it's done, I don't even know what I wanted from her. An apology? An explanation? I'm not even sure anymore.
Eleanor reached out, placing a hand over Maya's.
You wanted closure, and in a way you got it. But that doesn't mean the pain disappears overnight. It's going to take time.
Maya squeezed Eleanor's hand, grateful for the unwavering support she had always offered.
Thank you for everything. I don't know where I'd be without you.
Eleanor smiled warmly, her eyes twinkling with the same love and pride she had always had for Maya.
You don't have to thank me, Maya. You're my daughter. I'm proud of the woman you've become.
Over the next few weeks, Maya tried to process what had happened. The trial had stirred up emotions she had long buried, but Eleanor's advice lingered in her mind. Letting go of the past wasn't something that could happen overnight, but Maya knew she had to start somewhere. One afternoon, she decided to visit Lydia in jail. It wasn't an easy decision. Every fibre of her being wanted to stay away, to keep the distance that had protected her for so many years. But something inside her, a small voice, told her this was the first step toward truly moving on. When Maya arrived at the prison, she was led to a small, sterile room with a glass partition. She sat down and waited. A few minutes later, Lydia was brought in, dressed in a standard-issue orange jumpsuit, her face pale and drawn. Lydia's eyes widened in surprise when she saw Maya sitting there. For a moment, she seemed unsure of what to do, but then she sat down across from Maya, picking up the phone on her side of the glass. Maya picked up her phone as well, the two women staring at each other in silence for several long moments.
I didn't expect you to come.
Lydia said, her voice cracking.
I wasn't sure I would,
Maya replied honestly.
but I needed to see you. I needed to say a few things.
Lydia nodded, her hands trembling slightly.
I understand.
Maya took a deep breath, her voice steady.
You hurt me, Lydia. What you did was cruel, and it left scars I'll carry for the rest of my life. I'm not here to tell you that I forgive you, because I'm not sure I can, but I'm also not here to hate you.
Tears welled in Lydia's eyes, and she bit her lip to keep from crying.
And I'm so sorry, Maya. I've thought about you every day, and I regret what I did more than you'll ever know.
I believe you,
Maya said softly.
but this isn't about you anymore. It's about me. I came here because I don't want to carry this anger with me for the rest of my life. I'm ready to move on.
Lydia nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks.
I wish I could make it right.
You can't,
Maya said firmly.
but that's okay. I've made my own life, and I'm proud of who I've become. I don't need you to make things right for me anymore.
For the first time, Maya felt a sense of peace settle over her. The weight she had carried for so long began to lift, and she realized that Eleanor had been right. Letting go of the past wasn't about the other person. It was about freeing herself from the pain.
I hope you find peace,
Maya said quietly, standing to leave.
but whether you do or don't, I've found mine.
With that, Maya walked out of the prison, the burden of her past finally beginning to lift. Months passed, and as the seasons changed, so did Maya. The confrontation with Lydia, though difficult, had given her the closure she needed. She no longer felt the lingering bitterness or the constant ache of abandonment. Instead, she focused on her work, her relationships, and the life she had built with Eleanor and her circle of friends. Eleanor, ever the source of wisdom, continued to guide Maya, though now it was more as an equal than as a mother to a child. The bond between them grew stronger, solidified by years of shared experiences and mutual respect. Maya knew that she would never fully forget the pain of her past, but now it no longer controlled her. She had faced the woman who had caused her the most harm and walked away stronger for it. For the first time in her life, Maya felt truly free, free from the shadows of her childhood, free from the anger and resentment that had once consumed her. And as she looked toward the future, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same strength and resilience that had carried her through the darkest moments of her past. The past was no longer a weight she had to carry. It was simply a part of her story, one chapter in the life of a woman who had survived, thrived, and ultimately found her peace. If you enjoyed this story, please support us by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Thank you for watching, and see you in our next story.